Are stock plugins that come with your DAW actually any good? Today I want to talk about why that isn't really true and some of the misconceptions that people have, as well as some of the benefits to really getting to know your DAW's stock plugins. Now, many people think that the plugins that come bundled with your DAW are not the best and they want to upgrade as soon as they can. Personally, I think this mindset comes down to a few different main reasons: the marketing, the look, the sound, and the feature set. So that's what I'm going to talk about today to try and break that stigma around the stock plugins. What is up, guys? Alex from ANAK Creates here. I'm an audio engineer, mixer, and producer who has been working in the professional music industry for over a decade. So what I'm talking about today is not specifically DAW related. It's stock plugins that come with any DAW. Most DAWs today do come with a pretty great array of plugins to get you started creating. Not all DAWs are created equally, and thus their plugins are not created equally, but that goes more towards which DAW works for the type of music you make and the things that you need it to do, which is not something I'm going to get into today, but that is a topic of a future video. So first, let's talk about the marketing. Now, when a company that makes a DAW markets their plugins, it's more as a bundle of plugins that come along with the DAW to get you started very easily. It's more of an addition and a feature of the DAW to have all of these different plugins, which means they don't actually get into the specifics of each plugin and the features that each one of them has. Now, on the flip side of this, a company that markets just a single plugin or a bundle of plugins of their own, they can talk about each individual plugin separately and go into every single feature, because that's the whole point of why you'd spend money with them to buy their third-party plugin. Second, the look of stock plugins. Well, this shouldn't really affect how we think about them because we're not in it for the look, we're in it for the sound. It still does play a role in how we think it sounds. Now, stock plugins tend to have more of a bland look or a blended look because they're trying to fit into the DAW that they're a part of. Unlike third-party plugins that really have to stand out to make you think to actually use those plugins and justify visually all the money that you spent on it. However, yes, I am the first one to admit that I wish the DAW manufacturers would put a little bit more effort into the GUI design and revamping it every so often, but it's just not a focus for them and it doesn't have to stand out in a marketing advertisement. Therefore, the look suffers a little bit and doesn't look as flashy, which makes us think that it doesn't sound as good. However, that brings us to the next one, which is the sound of the plugins. The look has nothing to do with the sound, and in many cases, the plugins that come bundled with your DAW are actually extremely functional, have lots of great features, and sound just as good as third-party plugins. They might not have all of the fancy features, but the core element of functionality and sound, they're rock solid and typically sound really good. You just have to use them and manipulate them just like any other plugin. Now, I agree that some of the plugins don't have fancy over-the-top features like some of the third-party ones that you can purchase, but at its core, an EQ is an EQ is an EQ in many respects. While certain fancy features definitely can be very helpful, it doesn't mean that the plugin that doesn't have them is just not functional or sounds bad. And the other thing is most stock plugins are very neutral sounding because they're designed to really help anybody that's using that software. So staying a bit more neutral gives the most functionality to the most amount of people. Now, some of the misconceptions that people say about stock plugins. One of them is there aren't enough stock plugins, but it's not that there aren't enough stock plugins. They just don't have a million EQs or a million reverbs. Most DAWs are going for a wide range of plugins, not a million options of one type of plugin. Now, in some DAWs, I do agree that some specific tools are missing, one of which is definitely noise reduction. When you really start getting specific into that and need it to do more fancy features, that's when a third-party plugin is definitely worth it to do that job. One other main misconception I see is that people think that the stock plugins don't have any fancy features. They're just very basic and bland. And well, they are designed to kind of look that way and feel that way so that a beginner user in the DAW can get started. If you dig a little deeper, they're actually very wide-ranged and have some great features built in. Now, I'm not saying that that is all plugins in all DAWs, but dig into them a little bit more before you knock them and think, is that feature fancy or is it actually functional? Because typically these stock plugins are more functional than fancy and flashy. Now, that leads me into a note that I do want to say, especially for new mixers. Get to know the tools in your toolbox before expanding that toolbox. You can make amazing sounding mixes. There are many pros that use a lot of stock plugins on their mixes. Do a mix with only stock plugins. Learn what the limitations actually are, not what people say they are or what you think they might be. Actually dig into the plugins, learn the limitations to understand better what part of your toolbox do you need to expand more on. If you don't know how to use the plugins that you already have and then you just buy new plugins, It's just a never-ending cycle of not actually knowing your toolbox or how to use them. So start with the stock plugins and get to really understand them. Push your creativity and knowledge through those limitations. Now, along with that, there are a couple of benefits that I want to highlight with using stock plugins. One, like I said, you get to know your DAW better. Two, they will always be where your DAW is. This is especially relevant if either you or your sessions are moving between studios, because there's more of a guarantee it'll actually open up. For the most part, the plugins will be solid when the DAW gets updated. Now, in the end, all of this comes down to workflow. What enables you to get your best work done as easily and as quickly as possible? And what sparks creativity for you? But if there's one thing I can leave you with, it's that stock plugins don't sound bad. They are functional and get the job done. That is it for this video, guys. Give this video a thumbs up if you found it helpful. Leave a comment down below with your favorite stock plugin in your DAW that you use all the time. For me, it's the de-esser in Pro Tools. I absolutely love it. Subscribe so you don't miss any future videos. I will see you in the next one. Until then, always be creating.